Imagine taking your child to a routine checkup, only to find out she was declared dead 6 years ago. What would you do? Hit subscribe and stay tuned to find out what happens next. It was supposed to be a routine checkup. For Jack, his daughter, Emily's health had always been a priority, but today there was something different in the air. His heart beat a little faster as he watched her swing her legs impatiently in the hospital waiting area. Her small fingers gripped his hand tightly, a soft reminder of how much she still needed him, even at 9 years old. Her bright, innocent eyes were full of curiosity, unaware of what was about to unfold. As they walked into the examination room, the nurse smiled at them kindly. "Just a simple blood test today, Mr. Carter," she said, preparing the equipment. Emily, ever the brave little girl, didn't flinch when the needle touched her arm. Jack smiled at her, trying to mask the unease he was feeling. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The hospital felt too quiet today, too still. It didn't take long for the nurse to finish the test. "I'll just input this into the system, and we'll have the results in a minute," she said. As she walked out, Jack sat down beside Emily, trying to keep his mind off the looming uncertainty of the results. He glanced around the room, taking in the sterile walls and the faint smell of antiseptic. His mind drifted, thinking back to that day 6 years ago, the day his life had turned upside down, the day his daughter was supposed to be dead. A few moments later, the nurse returned with a serious look on her face. She glanced at Jack and then at the computer screen beside her. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice uncomfortably formal, "there seems to be a mix-up. The system has flagged a match with our missing child database. Your daughter's DNA is coming up as a match with a girl who was declared dead 6 years ago." Jack's heart skipped a beat. His breath caught in his throat as the words didn't register at first. He stared at the nurse, disbelief written across his face. "What do you mean?" he stammered, standing up from his chair. The nurse pushed the screen toward him, and Jack's eyes widened. On the screen was a photo of his own daughter, but beside it, in bold official letters, were the words, "Deceased, identified body 6 years ago." Emily, confused and now sensing the shift in the air, tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, what's happening?" Jack could barely speak, his mind racing. 6 years ago, they had gone through a nightmare, a terrible tragedy that had torn their family apart. Emily had been taken from them, found in a river. He'd seen the body, identified her, and they had buried her. The doctors had confirmed it. There was no mistake. But now this. "Who is this girl?" Jack asked, his voice barely above, a whisper. His mind raced as he stared at the computer screen. The words, "Deceased, identified body 6 years ago," seemed to blur in front of him like some cruel joke. His breathing grew shallow as the room seemed to close in on him. Emily, still holding on to his sleeve, looked up at him, her small face twisted in confusion. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice shaky. "What's wrong?" Jack's hand trembled as he placed it on her head, trying to keep his composure. His mind screamed for answers, but none came. "I don't know, sweetheart," he managed to say, his voice barely audible. He turned to the nurse, his eyes desperate. "You have to be mistaken. This can't be real." The nurse, clearly uncomfortable, stepped back. "I'm not sure what's going on, but this is what the system says. I'll get the doctor." As she left the room, Jack stood frozen, staring at the screen. His mind was flooded with memories of that terrible day 6 years ago. Emily had gone missing. The police had searched for weeks, and then her body was found, lifeless and cold, floating in a river not far from their home. He'd been the one to identify her, to make the painful decision to bury her. He'd watched as they lowered the casket into the ground. But now, it didn't make sense. Could they have made a mistake back then, Jack thought, his mind reeling. Could someone else have been buried in her place? His thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of the impossible. Emily tugged at his sleeve again. "Daddy, what's happening?" Jack looked down at her, his heart breaking. He didn't have an answer. The uncertainty, the fear, it was all too much. The door opened and Dr. Harris, the pediatrician, stepped in. She looked at Jack with a concerned expression. "Mr. Carter, I know this must be confusing, but we need to run some more tests. We'll start with a second DNA sample, and I'll personally handle it. This situation is highly unusual." Jack nodded, still unable to speak. He watched as Dr. Harris took a sample from Emily's arm once again. The nurse left the room, leaving them alone in the sterile silence of the hospital. Jack was torn between disbelief and the overwhelming desire to know the truth. As the minutes dragged on, Jack's thoughts kept returning to one question. If this wasn't his daughter, then who was she? And where was Emily? The next few hours felt like days. Jack could barely sit still. His mind raced as he stared at the hospital's sterile walls, his fingers tapping nervously on the armrest. Emily had fallen asleep in his lap, exhausted from the tension and the endless questions. Jack gently stroked her hair, his thoughts consumed with the one question he couldn't answer. Where was Emily? The door creaked open, and Dr. Harris stepped in, her face grim. She glanced at Jack, and for the first time, he noticed the worry etched in her features. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice lower than usual. "We've received the results, and I need you to sit down." Jack's heart skipped a beat, and a chill ran down his spine. He could already feel his hands beginning to tremble. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice cracking. "What do the results say?" Dr. Harris motioned for him to sit, and Jack obeyed without thinking, gently shifting Emily so she was lying on the couch, still fast asleep. He could feel his stomach tightening in knots. The waiting, the uncertainty, had already pushed him to the edge. He needed answers, no matter how impossible they seemed. Dr. Harris pulled up the computer screen and showed him the updated data. The familiar photograph of Emily was still there, the same one that had been on the original death certificate 6 years ago, but this time there was something new. There were multiple files now, all marked unidentified, with several discrepancies underlined in red. DNA matches, missing records, anomaly detected. Jack's throat tightened as he stared at the screen. "What does this mean?" he asked, his voice cracking. Dr. Harris took a deep breath. "The DNA results show that your daughter, the one sitting in front of me, has the same genetic profile as the child in the system. But there's a twist." She paused, clearly struggling to find the right words. "It seems that there is no record of Emily's death in any official database. No official autopsy, no final report. Just a body that was identified by you." Jack's mind spun with the implications. "What are you saying? Are you telling me that someone else was buried in her place? That Emily is alive?" Dr. Harris shook her head slowly. "I don't know, but that's the problem. There's no official record, no closure. It's almost as if someone tried to erase everything. All we have are these inconsistencies." Jack's chest tightened, his thoughts swirling into a frenzy. "But she was dead. I saw the body. I held her in my arms. I buried her. I watched them lower her into the ground. How could this be happening?" The room felt suffocating now. He could hardly breathe. Dr. Harris leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "What I think is happening here is that there's more to this than we realize. If this girl is truly your daughter, then something isn't adding up. We need to find out what happened to the real Emily and who this girl really is." Jack's head was spinning. Emily stirred in her sleep, her small hand curling into a fist, and Jack gently stroked her hair again, trying to calm himself. "But what if she's my daughter? What if she never died? What if all of this is a mistake?" Dr. Harris's eyes met his, a mixture of sympathy and disbelief in her gaze. "I want to believe that too, Mr. Carter, but we need to be sure. We need to find out what happened. This isn't just about the past 6 years. This is about your daughter's life, and quite frankly, I'm concerned for her safety. Jack's stomach turned at the thought. Safety? What did she mean by that? He didn't want to hear those words. His mind flashed to 1,000 possibilities, all of them dark, all of them impossible to believe. Before he could respond, the door opened again. A young nurse entered, carrying a folder. She handed it to Dr. Harris, who skimmed through the documents quickly, her brow furrowing deeper. "Mr. Carter," she said, "there's something else. This girl, the one with you, has no medical history, no records from any hospital, nothing from birth until now." Jack's mind went numb. "What do you mean? How is that possible?" Harris stared at the papers in disbelief. "It's as if she's appeared out of thin air. There's not a single trace of her existence before today." Jack felt his heart drop into his stomach. Was this some kind of twisted game? Who was this girl, really? And what had happened to his Emily? Was this truly his daughter sitting beside him, or was he holding on to a lie? Emily woke up, blinking in confusion as she looked around the room. Her small voice broke the silence. "Daddy, I'm scared." "What's going on?" Jack quickly gathered her into his arms, holding her tight, trying to shield her from the storm of questions he couldn't answer. He couldn't protect her from the truth. Not yet. But he could protect her from the fear. "I'm here, sweetie," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out." Dr. Harris stood silently by the door, watching the scene unfold, as though trying to figure out how to intervene without making things worse. Jack's world was unraveling piece by piece. And the worst part? He still didn't know what was real. The hospital room felt colder now, and the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than ever. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Emily was curled up beside him, quietly coloring, her little face innocent and unaware of the chaos around her. Jack tried to focus on her, but his mind kept drifting to the impossible, questions that Dr. Harris had raised. Could Emily really be alive? Could it all be some kind of mistake? Dr. Harris had stepped out to consult with other doctors, and Jack found himself alone in the sterile white room, lost in thought. His fingers ran through his hair, tugging at the strands in frustration. He had never been more confused in his life. Emily shifted in her sleep, her tiny hand brushing against Jack's. He looked down at her, and for a moment, he could almost convince himself that everything was fine, that this was his daughter, the same girl he had raised, the same girl he had buried, but the nagging questions kept pulling him back. The door opened again, and Dr. Harris returned, her expression serious but calm. She wasn't alone this time. A tall man in a dark suit followed her into the room. His eyes were sharp, and there was a quiet intensity to his demeanor. Jack didn't recognize him, but something about him seemed out of place. "Mr. Carter," Dr. Harris began, her voice steady. "This is Detective Adams. He's been assigned to your case." Jack felt his stomach drop. A detective? "Why a detective?" Jack finally asked, his voice tight. "What does this have to do with the police?" Dr. Harris stepped forward, her voice soft but urgent. "Mr. Carter, there are some inconsistencies in Emily's records that we need to look into. We've contacted the local authorities because there's something we need to confirm. We can't just dismiss what's happening here." Jack's heart started pounding in his chest. Inconsistencies? What did they mean? Detective Adams took a seat across from Jack, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Carter, we've been looking into the details of your daughter's death. The records don't match up. The autopsy report from 6 years ago. There's no evidence that it was ever completed." Jack's breath hitched. "What do you mean, no evidence?" "The report was filed, but there's no record of it being processed," the detective explained. "It was rushed, and there were irregularities in the paperwork. We've seen similar cases before, but this is something else." Jack's mind spun. Rushed. Irregularities. How could that be? He had seen the body. He had held Emily in his arms, kissed her forehead one last time before the funeral. There was no way this could be happening. How could this happen? Jack whispered, barely able to speak. Dr. Harris's voice was quiet but firm. We don't know yet, Mr. Carter, but we need your help to find out more. We need to figure out where the real Emily went, if this girl is indeed her, and why the records don't line up. Jack looked at Emily again. She was still sitting there, her little fingers grasping the crayons as she scribbled in her coloring book. She didn't know what was happening, and Jack was doing everything he could to keep her safe from the truth that was slowly tearing his world apart. I don't understand, Jack muttered. How is this even possible? Who's been lying? Detective. Adams leaned forward. That's what we need to find out. There are too many unanswered questions here, and right now, we're treating this like a missing person case. If the girl in front of us is your daughter, then something's terribly wrong. Jack felt the floor beneath him shift. A missing person case? But he had already buried Emily. He had already grieved. He had said goodbye. Could it all be a lie? Emily looked up from her drawing, her eyes wide with concern. Daddy, are we going home soon? Jack swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to escape. I don't know, sweetie. We might have to stay here for a while longer, okay? Emily nodded, clearly exhausted, and snuggled back into Jack's side. She didn't understand what was happening, and Jack wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. The truth was too much for a child to bear. Dr. Harris and Detective Adams exchanged a look, and Jack knew they were both thinking the same thing. Time was running out, and they had no answers. We'll need to speak to the authorities again and start a full investigation into the case, Detective Adams said, standing up. But for now, I think we've done all we can here. Jack nodded, still in shock. I just want to know the truth. Dr. Harris placed a hand on his shoulder, offering what little comfort she could. We will get to the bottom of this. I promise you. As they left the room, Jack sat there in the stillness. Emily nestled against him. For the first time, he didn't know if he could trust his own memories. The answers were out there, but were they the ones he wanted to hear? The next few days felt like a blur. Jack barely left Emily's side. Each time he tried to return to some semblance of normality, the questions gnawed at him, pulling him further, into a spiral of confusion. He couldn't escape the thought of Emily and whether the girl next to him was truly his daughter or someone else entirely. They had returned home from the hospital, but it felt different now, quieter, emptier. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the house was somehow a stranger to him. Emily seemed fine, still the same bubbly child who loved to sing along to cartoons and talk about her day at school. But Jack couldn't help but wonder, was this really his daughter? Or was he just seeing what he wanted to see? The police had started their investigation. Detective Adams called him regularly with updates, though they were always the same. No solid leads, no explanation for the discrepancies in the records. Jack had agreed to let them take another look at the files, but it still didn't make sense. They had checked and rechecked the autopsy reports from 6 years ago. They had even started asking about the circumstances surrounding the funeral. Every part of the past seemed to have been questioned. Jack had barely slept since that day in the hospital, his mind always racing. He spent his nights scrolling through old photos of Emily, the way she looked before the accident, before everything changed, the way she looked in her casket. He couldn't bring himself to delete any of them, even as the suspicion slowly crept in that maybe he wasn't seeing the full picture. Emily was still her bright self, but even she couldn't shake the oddity of the situation. She would ask questions that seemed innocent, but always carried an edge. Daddy, why do people keep asking about me? Am I in trouble? Jack couldn't lie to her, not about this, but the truth was too much for a little girl to bear. No, sweetie, he said, brushing her hair out of her eyes. No one's in trouble. They're just asking a lot of questions. You don't need to worry about that, okay? But the questions kept coming, each one more uncomfortable than the last. How had she ended up in the hospital in the first place? How could she have disappeared without anyone noticing? Who was she really? Jack could see the cracks forming, but he didn't know how to fix them. One night, after Emily had gone to bed, Jack found himself sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee. His mind wouldn't stop spinning. He stared at the clock, watching the minutes tick by, but it felt like nothing was moving. What was happening? Where was the truth? The phone rang, breaking the silence. Jack jolted, his heart racing as he grabbed the receiver. "Mr. Carter," it was Detective Adams. "We found something. I need you to come in. This is important." Jack's stomach twisted. "What did you find?" "We're still piecing things together, but it's something we think you should see in person." "We don't want to jump to conclusions, but we've uncovered something in the records that could change everything." "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Jack said, his voice already filled with a mix of dread and anticipation. His hands shook as he hung up the phone. He didn't want to go. Every part of him screamed to just stay home, to keep his life the way it was, with Emily by his side, pretending everything was fine. But the truth was waiting, and he knew it would come, out one way or another. Driving to the station felt like a dream. The city lights blurred outside the window as he tried to focus on the road ahead, but his mind kept drifting back to that day 6 years ago. His mind kept going back to the body they had buried. His daughter. He had seen her. He had said goodbye. How could it be that she was sitting in front of him now, smiling, alive? Could it really be a mistake? When Jack arrived at the station, Detective Adams led him into a small office, his expression somber. He sat down across from Jack, his fingers tapping on the table. "Mr. Carter, I know this has been difficult. I can only imagine what you've been going through. But we've uncovered something, a detail we missed earlier." Jack leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "What is it?" "We've been digging deeper into the hospital records," Adams explained, "and we found a connection between Emily's case and another case that was thought to be closed. It's not a direct match, but the similarities are disturbing." Jack's pulse quickened. "What similarities?" "The name of a woman," Detective Adams said, his voice steady but urgent. "A woman who was involved in a case from 6 years ago, a case that was dismissed but not forgotten. She was connected to an abduction, and we believe she may know something about what happened to your daughter." Jack's mind raced. "Who is she? What's her connection to Emily?" "We don't have all the details yet, but we're tracking down leads. We'll keep you updated," Detective Adams said, standing up. "But we need you to stay calm. There's still a lot we don't know, but we're getting closer." Jack didn't know what to think. Abduction? What did this mean? Was this connected to the disappearance of the little girl all those years ago? Could Emily really have been the victim of something far worse than a simple accident? As he left the station, the weight of the conversation hung over him like a storm cloud, dark and menacing. He didn't know what to make of the new information. But one thing was certain. The more he learned, the more dangerous the truth seemed to be. Back home, Emily was waiting for him, her face lighting up when she saw her father. Jack pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her close, needing to feel the warmth of her small body against his. For a moment, everything felt normal again. But deep down, Jack knew that things would never be the same. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and restless nights. The words abduction and missing echoed in Jack's mind, haunting him. He couldn't shake the idea that the past 6 years of his life had been built on a lie. Emily, the little girl he thought he had lost forever, was sitting right in front of him. But how could that be? How could he have been so wrong? Every time he looked at her, he saw the same bright eyes and innocent smile, the same mischievous laugh that had been her trademark since she was a toddler. but the questions were never far behind. Was she truly his daughter? Or was she someone else entirely? Someone living in the shadow of a mistaken identity? Jack spent most of the next few days glued to the phone, desperately trying to get more information from Detective Adams. The detective had been helpful, but his answers were always vague, and there were more and more gaps in the investigation. They had traced the woman connected to the abduction case, but no one seemed to know where she was. She had vanished off the radar years ago. Meanwhile, Emily had begun to notice the change in the atmosphere at home. She wasn't stupid. Kids aren't. She would look at Jack with concern, her big eyes full of questions she couldn't articulate. "Daddy," she said one afternoon, her voice small, "why are people always asking about me?" Jack's heart clenched. He didn't want to lie to her, but the truth was too complicated for a child to understand. "It's nothing, sweetie," Jack replied, trying to keep his tone light. "Just some grown-up things you don't need to worry about." But Emily wasn't buying it. She frowned, staring at him with a seriousness that was far beyond her years. "Is something wrong, Daddy? Are you upset?" Jack swallowed hard. He didn't know how to explain this to her. How could he possibly make her understand the storm raging inside him? How could he tell her that the man she thought of as her father might not be the one who raised her? "No, baby, nothing's wrong," Jack said, pulling her into his arms. "We're just figuring some things out, okay?" Emily nodded slowly, as if trying to absorb his words, but Jack could see the doubt in her eyes, the confusion. He knew that no matter how much he tried to protect her, the truth would find its way to the surface eventually. It was that night, after Emily had gone to bed, that Jack received the phone call. It was Detective Adams again. "Mr. Carter, we've made some progress. We've located the woman connected to the case. She's alive, but she's in protective custody. We've managed to get a statement from her." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What does she know? Does she know anything about my daughter?" "There's something troubling," Adams said, his voice tight. "The woman claims that she was involved in the disappearance of a young child around the same time your daughter was reported dead. She doesn't know the child's name, but she's certain it was a girl, and she describes her as looking very similar to Emily." Jack's breath caught in his throat. "Are you telling me that this woman might know what happened to Emily? Where she went?" "We're still trying to piece it together," Adams replied. "But the woman says she saw the child before she disappeared. She says she remembers the girl being in a car, being driven away." Jack's mind raced. A car? Who had taken Emily? Was it possible she had been taken all those years ago, and he had been told she was dead? Could he have been lied to, tricked into believing his daughter was gone forever? "Where is she now?" Jack demanded. "Where is the woman?" "We've got her in a secure location," Adams said, "but she's not ready to talk fully yet. She's scared. She's been through a lot, and we're trying to get her to cooperate, but I wanted you to know that we're getting closer. We're going to need your help soon." Jack didn't know what to feel. The mix of fear and hope was overwhelming. Could it really be possible? Could Emily have been taken, and he just never knew? He hung up the phone and sat there in the silence, the weight of it all crushing him. His whole life, the life he had built after Emily's death, seemed like it was crumbling apart. And at the same time, he felt a flicker of hope. Hope that his daughter hadn't died, that she had somehow survived. But if that was true, then who was the child he had buried all those years ago? The next few days passed in a haze. Jack hardly slept, the uncertainty gnawing at him, keeping him up at night. He spent his time with Emily, trying to act normal, for her sake, even though he was falling apart inside. He would watch her play with her toys, her laughter a reminder of what he had lost, or what he thought he had lost. Detective Adams called again, but the news wasn't good. "We've hit a dead end. The woman's refusing to speak further. We don't have anything concrete yet." Jack's frustration was palpable. "But you said she knew something. She saw the girl. How can she just stop talking?" "We don't know yet, Mr. Carter, but we'll keep pushing. Adams reassured him. The more we can get her to open up, the closer we'll be to finding out the truth. Jack's mind was spinning. He had been hoping for a breakthrough, but it seemed like they were no closer to finding out what had really happened. The woman was hiding something. But why? And what could she possibly know about the disappearance of his daughter? He couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was just out of reach, and with every passing moment, the questions became more pressing, the answers more elusive. The silence in the house was deafening. Jack sat in the dim glow of the kitchen light, a cup of coffee cold and forgotten in his hand. Emily was upstairs, asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm swirling around them. Jack was grateful for that. He wanted to keep her safe, protect her from whatever dark truth was slowly creeping closer. It had been over a week since the call from Detective Adams. Since then, nothing had been concrete. The woman they were investigating, the one who claimed to have seen the missing child, had gone silent. Every lead had turned cold. The detectives had dug deeper into the records, but every attempt to find anything substantial had led to more dead ends. Jack couldn't stop thinking about that night. In the hospital, the DNA test, the name in the database, the realization that Emily had been declared dead 6 years ago. He kept wondering, what if they were wrong? What if everything he knew about Emily's death was a lie? The questions swirled in his head, louder than the quiet of his house. Was this really Emily? Or was it someone else? He stood, up abruptly, the chair scraping across the floor, and walked over to the stack of files on the dining table. Dr. Harris had given him copies of everything: the original death certificate, the autopsy report, hospital records. Every document pointed to one thing. Emily had died that day, 6 years ago, when the accident had taken her life. The body they had buried was supposed to be hers. Jack's eyes blurred as he flipped through the pages. He wanted to believe it. He wanted to believe that he had said goodbye to his daughter, that the grief he had felt for so many years was real, because it was easier than facing the possibility that his daughter had been taken and replaced with someone else. The sound of a door creaking open upstairs broke his concentration. Jack stood still, his heart racing as he heard soft footsteps on the staircase. He didn't need to turn around to know that it was Emily. She had a way of moving quietly, as if she was trying to sneak up on him, even when she wasn't. "Daddy?" Her voice was small, filled with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Why are you up so late?" Jack took a deep breath and turned around to face her. She was standing in the doorway, her little hands clutching the edge of the frame. Her hair was messy from sleep, her eyes still half closed. But there was something about the way she looked at him that made his heart ache. "Sweetheart," Jack said softly, his voice breaking. He forced a smile, even though his insides felt like they were tearing apart. "You should be in bed. It's late." "I couldn't sleep," she replied, stepping into the room. "I heard you talking to yourself." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What did you hear, Emily?" She paused for a moment, staring at him intently. "You said my name. You said I wasn't your real daughter." Jack froze, the air in the room thick with the weight of her words. His throat tightened, and his mind went blank. Had he said that? Had she heard him? "No, sweetie," he finally managed, taking a step toward her. "You didn't hear that. I was just talking to myself." Emily's eyes searched his face, as if she was trying to find the truth hidden there. She always seemed to know when something was wrong, when he was hiding something from her. And right now there was no way to hide it. The doubt, the fear, the growing uncertainty. It was all in his eyes. "Why are you scared, Daddy?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "Why don't you want to talk to me?" Jack felt his heart crack. He knelt down to her level, wiping away the stray tears that had begun to form in his eyes. "I'm not scared, baby. I'm just trying to figure some things out. Things that are really confusing." Emily reached out to touch his face, her tiny hand warm against his skin. "You'll figure it out. You always do." and then we can go back to how it was before. Jack forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. How could he ever go back to how it was before? The past 6 years had been a lie. One way or another, he didn't know what to believe anymore. He didn't know who to trust. His daughter had been taken from him once before. Could it really be happening again? "Let's go to bed, okay?" Jack said, standing up and taking her hand. "We'll figure this out tomorrow, but for now, I need you to rest." Emily nodded, letting him lead her back up the stairs. As they reached her room, she hesitated, turning back to look at him. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "I love you," she whispered. And for a moment, Jack could hear the fear in her voice. The same fear he had been feeling all along, the fear of not knowing who she really was or what was happening to her. "I love you too, sweetie," Jack said, hugging her tightly before tucking her into bed. "Everything's going to be okay, I promise." But as he stood by the door, watching her fall back asleep, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Something was coming, something he wasn't prepared for. And soon, he would have to face the truth. The truth about Emily. The truth about what happened all those years ago. The next morning, the air felt thick with anticipation. Jack woke up early, his eyes already open before the sunlight could filter through the blinds. His mind was heavy, the weight of the past week pressing on him like a physical burden. Every part of him screamed for answers, but none seemed to be within reach. He had tried to shield Emily from the chaos, but she knew something was wrong. The same questions that haunted him now lived in her innocent eyes. That morning, as Jack prepared for another day of uncertainty, his phone rang. It was Detective Adams. His stomach twisted. "Mr. Carter," the detective began, his tone somber. "We've gotten a break. We've located someone who knows what happened to your daughter." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What? Who?" "We found the woman," Adams continued. "The one connected to the abduction case. She's agreed to meet with you. We believe she holds the key to what happened to Emily." Jack stood up, his breath catching in his throat. "I'll be there in an hour. Don't tell her anything. Until I get there. I need to hear it from her." The detective agreed, and Jack hung up, barely able to keep his composure. He grabbed his jacket, his mind racing. Could this be it? Could this woman finally tell him what had happened all those years ago? Could she give him the answers he'd been seeking? When Jack arrived at the station, Detective Adams led him to a small interrogation room where the woman sat. She was older now, worn and tired, her face hidden behind dark sunglasses. But even through the disguise, Jack could see the same fear in her eyes that he had seen in the eyes of so many others involved in this investigation. The woman looked up when he entered the room, her gaze locking with his. "You must be Jack," she said, her voice raspy. "I've been waiting for this." Jack felt a knot tighten in his chest. "What do you know about my daughter?" he asked, his voice low, barely above a whisper. She hesitated before speaking. "I know what happened to her. I know where she is." Jack's heart raced and his pulse quickened. "Tell me, please." The woman took a deep breath and slowly pulled off her sunglasses, revealing a face lined with years of guilt and regret. 6 years ago, a child was taken from a hospital, a girl. She was placed with a family that wasn't hers. They told the family that she had died, that she had been killed in an accident. Jack's world spun. "What do you mean? Who took her? Who was the family?" The woman looked away, her gaze shifting uncomfortably. "I was involved in the scheme. I helped make it happen." Jack's chest tightened, his head swimming. "You helped kidnap my daughter." His voice cracked as the words left his mouth. She nodded slowly. "Yes. I was part of a group that ran a black market adoption ring. But the girl wasn't supposed to be Emily Carter. She was supposed to be someone else, someone whose parents weren't looking for her. But a mistake was made, and Emily, your daughter, ended up in that situation." Jack's mind reeled. What do you mean? How is that even possible? My daughter, I buried her. I saw her body. I said goodbye. The woman's voice trembled as she spoke. They told you she had died, but they lied. Emily was never supposed to be in that casket. Someone else was. We made sure the records were altered, that everything looked official. But Emily wasn't dead. She was alive, and she was sent to live with a different family. The family that adopted her. They had no idea what had happened. They were just told she was a lost child with no family. Jack's head was spinning. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. My daughter, alive, he whispered. I know this is hard to believe, the woman continued, her voice trembling with emotion. But I was there. I saw the whole thing. They switched the babies, and Emily. She grew up thinking she was dead, but she wasn't. She was never dead. Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to scream, to shout, to demand more answers. But instead, all he could do was stare at the woman in front of him, struggling to process what she had just said. But why? Jack managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. Why did they do it? Why take my daughter? I don't know everything, the woman admitted. But there were bigger forces at play. There were people who needed to erase certain parts of the past. They couldn't have Emily's real parents asking questions. They needed her to disappear, to be forgotten. So they made it seem like she died. But Emily, she didn't die. She was stolen. Jack closed his eyes, his heart pounding in his chest. Stolen. All these years he had thought his daughter was gone. He had mourned her. He had said goodbye. And now he was learning that everything he knew was a lie. Where is she now? Jack asked, his voice barely audible. She's with the family who raised her, the woman said quietly. But the truth is coming out. You'll have to talk to them to explain everything. They won't know who she really is. They've lived with this lie for years, just like you have. Jack's mind was spinning with 100 different thoughts, each one darker than the last. Emily, his daughter, had been taken from him, stolen from him, and the people responsible were still out there. But there was one thing Jack knew for certain now. Emily wasn't dead. She was alive, and she was out there somewhere. And no matter what it took, Jack was going to find her. The drive to the family's home felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white. He had been given an address, suburban house in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of house that looked so normal, so perfect, that it almost made him feel like he was the one living in the wrong world. He kept replaying the conversation with the woman in his mind. Emily had been stolen. She had never died. She had grown up in another home, thinking she was someone else, someone whose real parents were never looking for her. He still couldn't wrap his head around it. How could something so horrible have happened? How had no one noticed? Jack didn't know what to expect when he arrived, but the knot in his stomach tightened as he parked in front of the house. It looked like a typical American home, a 2-story with a manicured lawn, a basketball hoop by the driveway, a swing set in the backyard, the kind of place that spoke of safety, of family, of a life without secrets. He took a deep breath before stepping out of the car, the cool air doing little to calm his nerves. He had no idea how this meeting would go. Would they be angry with him for coming here, demanding answers? Would they deny everything? Or worse, what if they had known all along and had been part of the lie? Jack's mind raced as he walked up to the door and rang the bell. A few moments later, the door opened, revealing a man in his late 40s with a tired but friendly smile. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Jack standing there. "You must be Mr. Carter," the man said, his voice kind but cautious. "I'm Mark, Emily's father." Jack's throat tightened at the words, her father. It was a slap to his chest, the final sting in the wound that had been opened months ago when Emily's name had been linked to a missing child case. But he wasn't ready to be the father who walked away. He had to know the truth. "Mr. Carter, I understand this must be difficult," Mark continued, stepping aside to let Jack into the house. "Please come in." Jack hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The house was cozy, with family photos on the walls, toys scattered across the living room, and a sense of warmth that made it feel like a home. But for Jack, it felt like stepping into a stranger's life. Mark led him into the living room where a woman in her early 40s was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She looked up when she saw Jack and smiled, though there was unease in her expression. "Hi, I'm Lisa," she said, standing to greet him. "I've heard so much about you." Jack nodded but didn't speak immediately. He could feel the tension in the room, the weight of what had been left unsaid. "Emily's upstairs," Lisa said after a beat. "She's been asking a lot of questions about you, about why you want to meet us. We're all a bit confused, but we want to help, however." "We can," Jack barely heard her. His mind was focused on one thing. Emily, the girl he had loved, the daughter he had lost, and the daughter who had been living right under his nose, thinking she was someone else. "Can I see her?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lisa." And Mark exchanged a look, but Mark nodded. "Of course. She's in her room. You can talk to her." Jack stood frozen for a moment, feeling the enormity of the situation. This wasn't just meeting a family. This was meeting the people who had unknowingly raised his daughter, and the people who would never be able to understand the depth of the loss he had felt. They had all been living in the same world, yet on separate paths, and now their fates were colliding in the most unexpected way. Mark led Jack upstairs, past a series of doors and rooms, before stopping at one door. He knocked softly. "Emily," Mark called, "we have a guest here to see you." A soft voice came from inside the room. "Who is it?" "It's Mr. Carter," Mark replied. "Your biological father." Jack's heart skipped a beat. Her biological father. The words hung in the air like a weight that had to be carried, and Jack felt the burden of the truth fall heavily on him. The door opened slowly, revealing Emily standing in the doorway. She was a little taller now than when Jack had last seen her, but she still had the same bright, curious eyes, the same mischievous smile. She looked so much like his little girl, and yet so different at the same time. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, her voice unsure. "You're really him?" Jack swallowed hard, his chest tight. He didn't know what to say, how to explain all of this. How do you tell a child that the life they knew wasn't real? That the parents who raised them were strangers to their past? "I'm your father," Jack said finally, his voice shaking. "I'm the one who thought you were gone. I'm the one who—" He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Emily looked at him with wide, confused eyes. She wasn't angry, not yet. But there was a sadness there, a fear that was beginning to grow. Jack could see it. She doesn't know me. She doesn't know who I am anymore. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Jack reached out slowly, his hand trembling, and touched her shoulder. "I've missed you so much," he whispered. Emily looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "But I'm not your daughter. I'm not the Emily you lost. My name is Mia. I've always been Mia." "No," Jack interrupted softly. "You're Emily. You've always been Emily." The silence that followed was suffocating, and Jack could see the weight of the truth starting to sink in for both of them. Mia, or Emily, was confused, lost, and Jack was just as lost as she was. "I never wanted this to happen," Jack said quietly, his heart aching. "I never wanted you to be caught in the middle of this, but you're my daughter. You always have been." For the first time, Emily, or Mia, took a hesitant step forward, her eyes searching Jack's face for something she had never understood before. But there were still so many unanswered questions, so many broken pieces. And as Jack stood there, facing the girl he had lost and found again, he realized that finding the truth was only the beginning. The room was thick with silence, and Jack could feel the weight of 1,000 emotions crashing down on him. Emily, or Mia, as she had always known herself, stood in front of him, her eyes filled with confusion, fear, and a deep-seated sadness that mirrored his own. She wasn't angry, not yet, but Jack could see the storm brewing in her heart. "I don't understand," Mia said, her voice trembling. "Why are you saying this? Why are you telling me that I'm not who I thought I was, that I'm someone else?" Jack's chest tightened. He wanted to explain, to make everything make sense, but he knew there were no easy words for this. The girl he had lost wasn't just gone physically. She had been erased from his life in every way possible. And now he was standing in front of her, trying to piece together a story that was too complicated, too painful to explain. "Because you are my daughter," Jack said softly. "You always have been. You were stolen from me when you were just a baby. Someone took you, and they switched you with another child. You weren't supposed to die, Emily. You were supposed to come home." Mia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "But I don't remember any of that. I don't remember being someone else. My parents, Mark and Lisa, they raised me. They loved me. They're my parents. How can I just forget all of that?" Jack took a deep breath, fighting back his own tears. He reached out, his hand trembling as he gently took her hand in his. I know it's hard to understand, but this isn't about replacing them. They are your parents. They raised you. They loved you, and they're part of your life. But the truth is, you were never supposed to be their daughter. You were never supposed to be in that home. They were lied to, just like I was. And they don't deserve to be hurt by this either. Mia pulled her hand back, stepping back a few paces, her arms wrapped tightly around her body as though trying to hold herself together. "I don't know who to believe," she whispered. "How do I know you're telling the truth? I've lived my whole life believing one thing. How can I just switch everything? I can't just throw away my entire life." "I'm not asking you to forget your life," Jack said, his voice breaking. "You've had a life, and I don't want to take that from you. I never wanted this. But you deserve to know who you really are. You deserve to know what happened and what was taken from you. And most of all, you deserve to know that I've been looking for you, that I never stopped loving you. I thought you were gone forever." Bite was silent for a long time. She was struggling, torn between the family she had known for years and the reality that was being forced on her. It was impossible to reconcile the two worlds, the world of her parents who had raised her with love, and the world of her biological father who had been searching for her all these years. "I don't know if I can do this," Mia finally said, her voice cracking. "I don't know if I can just change everything." Jack took a slow, deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "You don't have to decide all at once. We don't have to figure this out in a single conversation. But I promise you this. No matter what, I will support you. If you need time, if you need space, I'll give you that. I just wanted you to know the truth. And no matter what happens, I'll always be here." Mia looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously. Her mind was racing, processing everything at once. The life she had known, the parents who had raised her, the memories she had built. They were all real, but they weren't enough to erase the truth Jack had just given her. "I don't know how to feel right now," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I think I need some time." Jack nodded, his heart aching as he stepped back. He couldn't push her to make a decision. Not now. It was too much, too fast. But he had given her the truth. That was all he could do. Mark and Lisa, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, stepped forward now, their faces lined with concern and sorrow. They had heard every word, and Jack could see the pain in their eyes. They had loved Mia as their own, and now they were caught in the middle of a truth they never wanted to hear. "We don't want to lose her," Mark said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "We raised her, Jack. She's our daughter, too. I don't care what the papers say. I don't care about anything except that she's ours." "I know," Jack said, his voice soft. "I know. I never wanted to take her from you. I don't want to hurt any of you. But she needs to know the truth. She deserves that." Lisa stepped forward, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "We've always known something was off," she said, her voice shaky. "She's never quite fit. But we loved her. We loved her, like our own. I don't know what this means now, but I want her to be happy. Whatever that means for her." Jack met their gazes, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel the bitterness he had carried for years. He felt the weight of the love they had for Mia, and he understood that they had never meant any harm. They had been lied to, just like he had. Mia looked between the three of them, her gaze flickering with uncertainty. "I don't know what to do with all of this," she whispered. "I don't know who I am anymore." "You are who you choose to be," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You don't have to make any decisions right now, but you are Emily Carter. You always have been." And as Mia stood there looking at the three people who had loved her, Jack realized that the journey was far from over. There would be no easy answers, but for the first time in years, he had his daughter back, and that was a beginning. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to build, one step at a time.